part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dennis Manoloff. Along with me for this ride is the great producer, Jordan Powell. And I'll tell you what, I'm in a foul mood, as I should be, given that the Cleveland Browns lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers 15-10 at First Energy Stadium on Sunday afternoon, October 31st, Halloween Day. It's bad enough, it's awful to lose to the Steelers, no matter where the game is played. It is exponentially worse to lose to the Steelers when the following is true or supposed to be true. The game is at home, in front of a packed house. The Steelers are in decline while the Browns are on the rise. And again, that was one of those that's supposedly true. Browns were coming off a mini bye, having played a week ago Thursday. Steelers scored just 15 points, meaning that a total of 16 is all that you needed to prevail. And the Browns had available and playing quarterback Baker Mayfield, wide receiver Jarvis Landry, wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver Hollywood Higgins, tight end David Njoku, tight end Harrison Bryant, tight end Austin Hooper, running back Nick Chubb, running back Dearness Johnson, and at least at the start, basically your entire offensive line. I mean, well, not basically, your entire offensive line. Now, they did lose Jack Conklin, the right tackle. I don't know. I can't remember if he returned to the game, but yeah, it's a loss to have Jack Conklin out. And Jordan Powell says no. Did Conklin not return?
Nope, he did not return, and it sounds like he may not anytime soon, as the injury to his elbow sounds pretty serious.
Okay. Yeah. So Conklin out, right tackle, definitely a problem. But the bottom line is the Browns had plenty on offense that should have been able to muster a grand total of 16 points. That's all you needed to win. Instead, 9 possessions, 306 total yards, and 10 points. And as a real punch in the gut, the Steelers were without their place kicker, Chris Boswell, who was knocked out, concussed late in the second quarter on a botched fake field goal attempt. So the Steelers didn't have a kicker, and by me saying didn't have a kicker, I mean it. Like, they weren't going to kick at all in the second half in terms of extra points or field goals, and yet the Cleveland Browns still lost to that opponent. 15-10 in a bitter, bitter pill to swallow. A really bad loss. I stopped just short of calling it embarrassing. Okay. There are some people on the Press Play Podcast Network, namely Kenny Rhoda. We love the Road Man, and Reggie and Rhoda will be dissecting it in their pod. And I saw where Kenny had said it was embarrassing. I'm not sure what Michael Reggie will say, but Roadman said it's embarrassing because the Steelers aren't very good and whatnot. I have more respect for the Steelers defense, I think, than Kenny does at this point. I thought it would be a hard-fought game, expressly because the Steelers defense, to me, is no joke. And so, therefore, I don't quite call it embarrassing. But I get those who do. I get where they're coming from. The bottom line is you scored 10 points if you're the Cleveland Browns. 10 against the Steelers at home when you have supposedly all of this talent on offense. Oh, my gosh. You know what? You hear of various words referred to by the first letter. I'm going to officially say that the T word should never be spoken around Cleveland until and unless they prove they deserve to have it mentioned. The T word being talent. How many times, how many minutes and hours and days did I hear in the offseason how much talent this team has? Talent. They're great everywhere. And once again, I bought the hype. But realistically, how many great players does this team have, specifically on the offensive side? Let's start with Baker Mayfield. He's the number 1 overall pick. Okay, fine. That gives him a lot of leeway, a lot of opportunity to prove himself. He was number 1 overall in 2018, but is he a great player? No, he hasn't proven to be great yet. Nick Chubb, yes. Kareem Hunt, yeah, he's good, but I don't know that he's great. You know, Dearness Johnson, I'm not going to dog Dearness because he's a backup. And I loved what he did against Denver, but he hasn't proven himself to be one of the talented bunch in the NFL. The tight end room. All right, well, they were supposed to be good, led by the handsomely compensated, super well-paid Austin Hooper. None of those guys, Hooper, Njoku, Bryant, none of them's a uber talented player, at least production-wise. Jarvis Landry, I mean, yeah, we like Jarvis. We do. He's a gamer, yes, and he plays hurt. And I'm not even holding the 2 mistakes against him when I look at his overall body of work in Cleveland, the 2 mistakes that he made today, the 2 big ones. But how great of a player is Jarvis? How great is Odell Beckham Jr.? Hollywood Higgins? And yeah, the O-line is good. Is it a great offensive line? No, I don't think so. And on defense, okay, Myles Garrett. Yes, a sack master. Is he a game wrecker? He hasn't proven to be yet. He's a sack master, but he's not a game wrecker. But I'm not going to, that said, I'm not going to dog Myles Garrett. I'll put him in the uber talented column on the defensive side. But how many other players that the Browns have on defense are so talented that they make the opposing offensive coordinator stay up at night? I mean, or have proven to not only have production on the field, but have been able to stay on the field. I speak of Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward is a guy I'd like to say is uber talented, but until and unless he can prove to be durable, I don't think you can take him seriously as an elite talent cornerback. He's got to stay on the field, and unfortunately, he's been unable to do that. I'm not saying it's his fault, but injuries follow certain people. Denzel Ward didn't play today because of a hamstring problem. John Johnson III, okay, he's supposed to be a great talent. Well, he had a neck stinger today, had to leave the game. But even then, Johnson's mixed bag this year really hasn't been a great player in the back. So where is this so-called overflowing overabundance of talent on this roster? Until they prove it on a week-in, week-out basis, I don't want to hear the T word. But today, I don't care if you had average supposed paper talent. You have to figure out a way, if you're the Cleveland Browns, to win this game. Somehow, some way, you figure out a way to win. Instead, the Browns lost 15-10. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The up-to-date AFC North standings have the Cleveland Browns in last place. Yes! This was supposed to be the year, baby. This was supposed to be different. We weren't supposed to mention SOB, right? The same old Browns. Well, guess what? The leader in the AFC North, the Ravens, 5-2. Second place, Cincinnati, 5-3. Third place, Pittsburgh, 4-3. And last place, Cleveland, 4-4. I mean, can you fault the cynic who says, I heard all off season that the Browns were going to be different. This was different. Oh, this Stefanski year. Oh, the year 2, they're going to stay. They're going to keep rolling. They're going to keep the momentum going from last year. Okay, let's see. They're 4-4. They just lost their first division game to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were supposed to be on the decline, 15-10 at home. And, what's different? Why can't this be SOB? Oh, but Dennis, don't you realize this is a new era? Well, okay, I felt good about it last year, but this team cannot live off of last year. 11-5, great. Playoffs, great. Playoff win, great. Checked a ton of boxes last year. Had plenty of reason to feel great about this year. But this is a new year, and the expectations being what they were, Super Bowl, means that when you look at a 4-4 team that just lost to the Steelers and scored only 10 points at home in the process, this is a colossal disappointment. This is one of the most disappointing teams in the NFL through 8 weeks. The Browns' victories against the Houston Texans, who are abysmally awful. They dropped to 1-7 today. Browns beat the Denver Broncos. Broncos won today to snap their 4-game losing streak. They're 4-4. The Chicago Bears, the Browns beat them in Cleveland. Bears slipped to 3-5 with a loss today. And the Minnesota Vikings are 3-3 entering their game against the Cowboys tonight, Sunday night. So none of the 4 victories have come against teams above 500. And the victory against, the 2 500 teams, at least as of this taping, Denver was on the road. They were in Cleveland, and they were missing a bunch of guys, and they're not good to begin with, as we know by the 4-4 record. In Minnesota, the Browns went to Minnesota and beat the Vikes. That's good. That's it. That's it, really, in my opinion. That's the quality victory, the Vikings, because I think the Vikings will turn out with, 9, maybe 10 victories. I might be wrong, but I think they're going to win 9 or 10 games. But so far through 8 games, you only have 1 quality victory, and you want me to ignore and scoff at SOB and say, oh, this isn't the same old Browns. I've got no choice but to start going down that road when the Browns perform as they did today, specifically head coach Kevin Stefanski and the Browns offense. Because for all of the criticism that the Browns defense takes, for all the flack that Joe Woods, the Browns DC, takes, the defense held the Steelers to 15 points. If you would have told the offense with all these so-called weapons before the game, hey, all you're going to need is 16 to win. You tell me the Browns offense wouldn't have signed up for that? Of course they would have. Instead, they lost 15-10. All right, when we return on the other side of the break, get a little deeper into Baker Mayfield's day, Kevin Stefanski's day, and what has been ailing the Cleveland Browns offense.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading,
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. The producer for this show is once again the great Jordan Powell. Browns lost to the Steelers 15-10 on the lakefront. A really, really, really bad loss. I know, losses in general are bad, but this one had a particular stench to it. Baker Mayfield, Browns QB1, number 6 in your scorecard, number 1 in your heart. Okay, fine. He's number 1 overall pick in 2018. I expect greatness from Baker Mayfield. I'm not seeing it. Today, 20 of 31 for 225. No TDs, no picks, 4 sacks. Yes, he is playing injured. I submit that a number of quarterbacks in the NFL wouldn't be able to answer the bell with the type of left shoulder that Baker Mayfield has, the torn labrum, the fracture. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of pain that Baker's in. But once you are cleared to play and once you are available and you go out and actually play, there needs to be, like, you cannot listen to and watch everything through the injury prism. You have to judge the player based on what he's doing out there, even though he's injured. And Baker Mayfield was mediocre again today. Could he have gotten help? Yes. Jarvis Landry let him down in 2 ginormous ways in the fourth quarter. Fumble caused by former Brown Joe Schobert. And then the next possession, a drop on 4th down. Both inside, deep into Steelers territory when the Browns were trying to overcome the 15-10 lead by the Steelers. So, yes, not all of Baker Mayfield's pedestrian numbers and limited production is on the player himself. But it's another game where Baker Mayfield just didn't dazzle for whatever reason. And I look at total QBR. I've said this on previous podcasts. I'll say it again because I believe in the metric. I believe in total QBR on the ESPN site. It was created by ESPN analysts, or at least someone who, or people who are now, were employed by ESPN, but it's used by ESPN. Scale of 1 to 100. And they typically have said that 75 is Pro Bowl caliber, but this year it's more like the best quarterbacks in the game are total QBRing in the 60s. So it's not necessarily 75 is the benchmark. It's more like high 60s, mid to high 60s. Well, these are Baker Mayfield's total QBRs this year. 57.2 at the Chiefs, 51.5 against the Texans, 45.7 against the Bears, 19.4 at the Vikings, 53.0 against the Chargers, 32.9 against the Cardinals, a DNP against Denver, and 54.1 today. So he hasn't had a total QBR above 58 all season on a scale of 1 to 100. And yes, there are extenuating circumstances in every game, but the common denominator is the Bake Show just hasn't really been all that good. Entering today's game, he had an average total QBR of 41.2. I looked it up, so you don't have to. He ranked 25th among qualifying quarterbacks in total QBR. 25th through 7 weeks, and he had played 6 games. The only people he was ahead of in total QBR, Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Davis Mills, Zach Wilson, and Justin Fields. You can't have that if from your QB1, from your number 1 overall pick in 2018, and he's not a greenhorn anymore. He's 4 years in. And yes, he's been through a lot of coaches, and a lot of systems, and a lot of teammates, and he's played hurt, but he's 4 seasons in. This is his 2nd season under Kevin Stefanski. He had all the continuity coming into the season, and he still hasn't authored up a QBR above 58. This season, Baker Mayfield has thrown 204 passes. He has thrown for 1,699 yards. You want to know how many touchdown passes he's thrown? 6. 6. In 204 pass attempts. Out of 1,699 yards, only a fraction of that has gone to touchdown passes. 6 touchdown passes in 7 games. That's ridiculous, especially in today's NFL, where the rules are catering to the offense, where the game is supposed to be heavily tilted in favor of the quarterback. And I know the Browns have a great running game potentially with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I'm not putting him in the elite class, but a really good back. I know he was a rushing champion once. You're going to quibble with me and say Kareem Hunt's a great player. Okay, fine. Let me just throw Hunt in the great player category, or the uber talented category that the Browns have all over the roster, supposedly. All right, I'm going to give you Chubb. I'll give you Hunt. I'll give you the O-line to be good. Maybe a piece here, a piece there is great, like Joel Bitonio or Wyatt Teller at the guards. Myles Garrett. But that's it. Jadeveon Clowney. Oh, he's great. Well, he's got to play every game before I could say that. Same with Denzel Ward. And I need to see more from John Johnson III before I believe that he's as good as he showed in the L.A. with the Rams. The point being is that I think one of the misconceptions about this team is that it had so much talent everywhere that it was going to have no choice but to win 12 games and, win by double digits and average 33 points every game. That said, even if you go along with my contention that the Browns aren't as quote unquote talented, the T word, as everybody says, Kevin Stefanski has got to do better. Sorry, not sorry. He has got to be better. It is so easy in this town. It's been so convenient when the Browns defense plays poorly. Oh, Joe Woods' fault. Joe Woods. Get rid of Joe Woods. Wait a minute. The head coach is Kevin Stefanski. He's responsible for everything. He doesn't get a pass, as it were, when the defense plays poorly. He's a head coach. He's responsible for the offense, the defense, the special teams, everything. But somehow, Kevin Stefanski is bulletproof around here, or figuratively speaking, of course, immune to criticism. He can't be touched, at least not until now. I'm sensing a sea change. But up until now, no. Any faults of the Browns are are Joe Woods' fault with the defense. Even when the defense plays well, it's not really Joe Woods, it's the players. Oh, okay. Joe Woods never gets any credit for anything, but he always gets the blame. And Stefanski never gets blamed when his team loses a high-scoring game. That's got to change. And on the offense, when the offense stinks, it can't just be Mayfield. It can't just be the position players or the O-line springing leaks or what have you, or the running backs having issues, whatever it is. The buck stops with Stefanski. And doubly so because he's the play caller. Part of the reason, a large part of the reason the Browns hired Kevin Stefanski was his mind, his Ivy League mind, his football mind, his offensive acumen. Well, okay. Last year, really good. Kevin Stefanski did a great job with the Browns in his first year as an NFL head coach. He came in during COVID, no less, changed the culture. As I said, checked a lot of boxes, got this team winning, believing, got them into the playoffs. They won a playoff game, albeit with, Stefanski at home because of COVID protocols. But they got to the divisional round. So a lot to like from Kevin Stefanski last year as head coach and play caller, even as I began to wonder when I saw some of the games down the stretch and Kevin Stefanski's play calling late in those games. I speak of the Jets game in the Meadowlands when the Browns blew it, when they had a chance to make the playoffs, clinch the playoffs. Then week 17 against the Steelers B team, the Steelers led by Mason Rudolph. The Browns kind of hacked and wheezed their way to that victory when Mike Tomlin and the Steelers were giving them every chance to win. The wild card matchup in Pittsburgh, well, Stefanski wasn't there. He was part of the game plan, of course, but he wasn't there calling the plays. That one went swimmingly, but I don't think you give Stefanski credit for how well that offense played beyond the fact that he orchestrated the game plan. In other words, he didn't call the game. The next week in Kansas City, the Browns got a gift from the football gods when Patrick Mahomes was knocked out in the third quarter because of a concussion, and the Chiefs wound up only scoring 22 points. So for all the talk about the terrible Browns defense, if you score 23, you beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead in the divisional round. Browns scored 17, lost 22-17. Missed a chance to go to Buffalo for the AFC title game. 23 was all you needed. Head-scratching plays late in that one by the Cleveland offense. Then this year, we've mentioned no real quality victories beyond just maybe the Vikings. If the Vikings do what I think they're going to do. I don't take the Denver Broncos seriously at 4-4 like I do the Vikings at 3-3. And, they might lose at Dallas and go to 3-4. Okay, but I still think the Vikings have a chance to be decent. I don't think that with the Denver Broncos. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Bottom line is barely one quality victory. And in the losses, late in the losses, the Browns offense has sputtered. At Kansas City, at the Chargers, certainly at home against the Cardinals because they were blown out in that one. And today, earlier today, this afternoon against the Steelers. And how about the victory in Minnesota? It was no thanks to Kevin Stefanski. They won 14-7. I have wondered, does Kevin Stefanski have too much on his plate? As smart as he is, and we know him to be brilliant smart, the smartest of football minds can be overwhelmed. Does he have too much on his plate? He doesn't seem to call a great game late, especially against quality teams. You think about that Vikings game. Yeah, they won 14-7, but There were so many chances for the Browns to salt that game away, make it a 2-possession lead, and they couldn't do it, in part because of head-scratching play calls. They kept the Vikings in it. So just because they won, that doesn't exonerate Stefanski in his play calling. Today was just a mess. 1 touchdown and 1 field goal against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are supposedly on decline. And even if I don't think the Steelers are in decline, even if I give the Steelers defense credit, this is not the Steel Curtain. This is not the 70s Steelers. This is not the 85 Bears or the early 2000s Ravens as far as defense goes. You can move the ball on the Steelers. You can score on the Steelers. And I said this on my radio program earlier today, on News Radio WTM 1100 and 106.9 FM. You don't want, if you're the Cleveland Browns, to have Baker Mayfield's stat line be eerily similar, shall we say, to Geno Smith's. You don't want that to happen. But guess what? It's happened. Because Baker Mayfield's numbers today, very similar to what Geno Smith did against the Steelers in Heinz Field a couple of weeks ago. Steelers won the game in overtime, 23-20. Kevin Stefanski, to borrow from baseball, is foul tipping a lot. He's swinging and missing, and he's foul tipping. He's not drilling balls up the gaps nearly enough, not homering nearly enough. He's struggling. And I don't see why he doesn't consider offloading the play calling to Alex Van Pelt. Is that guaranteed to turn this around for the Browns, get them out of last place? No. But I'd like to see it, because this season is slowly but surely slipping away. I know we're not even at the 50% mark, but the schedule doesn't get all that easy in the second half, if you will. Browns are going to be tested a lot. And I just wonder if Kevin Stefanski wouldn't consider that. Why wouldn't he? Because he's got to look at what his offense has done. As I said, week 17 last year, divisional round last year, quality opponents this year. Late in games, it's just been kind of a jumbled mess. And I know that would be a concession of defeat in Stefanski's mind. He'd be like, oh man, you know what? They hired me for my offense, and I don't want to show any signs of cracking right now to my team. But sometimes the best leaders know when to delegate, know how to delegate. And remember this, Coach Stefanski, you have the veto power on every single play call, offense and defense. You could go right over the top of Joe Woods if you wanted on defense. Say, look, I want to jailbreak blitz here. I don't want to drop, X amount into coverage. I don't want to rush just 3 or 4. I want to blitz. Boom. It's done. On the offensive side, if you turned it over to Van Pelt and you didn't like what Van Pelt was going to run on 3rd and 2, you call what you want to call. You are the head coach. You're the power. You can call anything you want with any one of the units, offense, defense, special teams. So I think Kevin Stefanski's got to look in the mirror and say, you know what? Let's try Alex Van Pelt with me as the veto power and see how that goes. Because this team is struggling offensively. And another problem that the Browns are having is Odell Beckham Jr. Well, I mean, it's really unbelievable that Odell Beckham Jr. is not doing what he's not doing. I mean, 1 catch for 6 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, 2 targets. 1 catch for 6 yards for this supposedly transcendent star? Well, okay. While I wonder what's going on with Odell, and we know he's a game or two, he's injured, but he's still able to go out there. While we wonder about Baker's connection with Odell, that's fair. We also need to say, ultimately, it's Kevin Stefanski's responsibility to figure out how to use the best receiver on the team. Or at least the receiver who has put up the most eye-popping numbers and the most, eye-popping catches. Because a lot of people would submit that Jarvis, as far as pound for pound, is just as good a receiver as Odell Beckham Jr. But nobody's kidding themselves when they look at Jarvis and they look at Odell and they say, okay, one of them's a legitimate game breaker. The other one doesn't quite have that capability. Odell's a game breaker, potentially. Jarvis isn't that necessarily that kind of guy. But you can only blame Odell and blame Baker to Odell, or Baker, Odell, Odell, Baker, for so long before you go, wait a minute. It's the head coach and play caller's responsibility to figure out how to better utilize Odell Beckham Jr. And Kevin Stefanski continues to fumble that ball, as it were. So it's just one headache after another with the Cleveland Browns, and it's really frustrating. And I didn't expect to be talking to you after 8 weeks about a 4-4 team that's in last place in the AFC North. The way I look at this, the way I look at the games they played, this team could be 6-2. I'm not going to say should be, but could be. They should have, there I go. They could have won either the Chiefs game or the Chargers game. One of those two. And they could have won the Steelers game. Legitimate belting by the Arizona Cardinals. So what are you going to do? You got beat and you got outclassed. But if we're talking 6-2, I'm not even worried about Stefanski. I'm not worried about his hiccups as a play caller. But we're not talking 6-2. We're talking 4-4. And therefore, Kevin Stefanski becomes a guy who's under the microscope. And it's fair to criticize him. It is fair to say that the honeymoon with Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland is over. That's fair. That's not being a cheap shot artist. That's not being unreasonable. It's fair because he's the head coach of a last place team through 8 weeks of the season with an offense that leaves plenty to be desired, with the number 1 overall pick at quarterback who's not performing at a high level, with a supposedly superstar wide receiver who's doing nothing, and with late game offense that's sputtering. All right, when we return, final segment, a quick look around the NFL as we wrap the Dennis Manoloff Show.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it, Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of a Swing and a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. The producer for today is the outstanding Jordan Powell. We've been talking about the Browns losing to the Steelers 15-10. Inexcusable loss, really, for a team that supposedly got Super Bowl in its sights. You can't score 10 points against the Steelers, any iteration of the Steelers, short of the Lambert, Ham, Mean Joe Green 70s Steelers. You can't score 10 at home against them. You got to score, 16. And that's a terrible loss by the Steelers. That was one of week 8 games. I wanted to say this, though, in wrapping this show and talking about going around the NFL, around the rest of the league. Just when you think that you have the NFL figured out, I got news for you. You don't. I've never felt like I have the NFL figured out. Some people do. Some people think they've got it. No, you don't. This week. Remember the flavor of the week last week, the flavor of the league last week, the Cincinnati Bengals, ladies and gentlemen. They punked the Ravens in Baltimore. They were being crowned 5-2 and topped the division. Here they come. And I said, the Bengals, while I don't know that they're here to stay, they certainly have arrived. How long they stay is up to them. But they made a statement in Baltimore. They'd also beaten Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Joe Burrow at quarterback, a lot of skill position talent, the T word. They have my respect. And they still have my respect, but not as much. Why? Because the Bengals, who were rolling after the Baltimore win, went to the Meadowlands to play the New York Jets. And the Jets beat them. And it wasn't just that the Jets beat them. It's that Mike White beat them. Backup quarterback Mike White, 2018 fifth-round pick out of Western Kentucky by the Dallas Cowboys. Now with the Jets. Zach Wilson, out. Mike White, 37 of 45 for 405 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. Now, his total QBR wasn't all that great. It was in the 50s. But still. The Cincinnati Bengals, supposedly the team to beat, at least for a week, in the AFC North, got punked by the seemingly hapless Jets, who've now won 2 games. And by the way, the 2 victories for the Jets over the Tennessee Titans, who are ripping and snorting through everybody now, and the Cincinnati Bengals. So I thought the Bengals were going to go to New York or go to New Jersey and beat the Jets, take care of business. Nope. They lose, they're 5-3, and they get ready for the Browns. Another case of just when you think you have the NFL figured out, you actually don't. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're rolling. They're playing a different game than everybody else, or so it seems. They go to New Orleans. They're ready to face Jameis Winston and the Saints. Except Winston goes down with what looked like a gruesome leg injury early, replaced by journeyman backup Trevor Siemian, because they don't even have Taysom Hill, because I think Hill's still dealing with concussion symptoms. Trevor Siemian helps, not leads, but helps the New Orleans Saints defeat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 36-27. Tom Brady throws a terrible pick late. I mean, if you'd have told me the Buccaneers were going to be facing Trevor Siemian for the vast majority of that game, I would have said they would have won by 20. Instead, they lost 36-27. So those are two examples of how you just can't count on the NFL from week to week to give you any degree of consistency. Think about the Patriots. They were supposed to be terrible, right? Okay, yeah, they went to L.A. and beat the Chargers. I think it was Inglewood. They went to Inglewood and beat the Chargers. Justin Herbert, the cat's meow after his rookie year last year. Really bad pick. Pick 6. Cost him the game. No guarantee there. I mean, obviously the Chargers looked good early, but they've come back to earth. They got smashed in Baltimore. They got beat by Belichick at home. Rookie QB Mac Jones and the New England Patriots beat the Chargers. Geno Smith led the Seahawks to, it's against the Jaguars. That doesn't really count. But Geno Smith and the Seahawks just dismantled the Jacksonville Jaguars today in Seattle. And on it goes. The NFL is crazy. Week to week, just absolutely crazy. And unfortunately, when you see the Patriots do what they're doing, that's another team the Browns are going to have to get past. And by the way, the Browns play the Patriots soon in Foxborough. That's another wild card contender. There's traffic in the AFC. So not only are the Browns 4-4, but they've lost to 3 contenders in the AFC who are not currently leading their divisions. The Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Steelers. That's a problem. And dare I say this, I hate to do this at week 9, but you got to beat the Bengals week 9. You have to if you're Cleveland. By hook or by crook, you got to figure out a way to beat them. It's at their place. Okay, fine. You have to win that game. You can't fall to 4-5, 0-2 in the division, and you'll be scrounging around trying to get over the Bengals, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Chargers. The Chiefs are sub 500 right now, but they have a win over you head-to-head, and they're good. They'll figure it out. Probably Monday night against the Giants will get them to 4-4. So there's plenty of traffic that you got to deal with. In addition to trying to figure out how to win your division, you got to figure out, okay, if we don't win the division, can we get in to the playoff party? And right now it's not looking too good. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. Thanks most of all to Jordan Powell for producing. We'll talk to everybody soon.